Good morning, guys. Here's your weekly lecture. This is the Thursday class. I always wanted to teach my dog's down here. I always wanted to teach a class in blue jeans and a Hawaiian shirt. So here I am. This is kind of cool, actually. It's got the battleships from World War II on it. Here's my dog Ranger. You can see him in the back, little beagle. Okay. Anyway, he's nosing around looking for some food or something like that. All right, let's get started here. A couple of announcements. First of all, on about May 1st, I'm going to send you guys, each one individually, a listing of your grades, okay, just to verify. Some of you had me in class before, and I always pass around my grade book, okay, so you can make sure that the findings are accurate, the recordings are accurate, that I haven't missed anything or given you the wrong grade, that sort of thing. So I'm going to take care of that for you. You'll be getting that around the end of the month, okay? Some of you are starting to think about extra credit options too. Okay, extra credit at this point really boils down to, given limitations, being housebound and stuff like that, really boils down to a couple of options here. One is you might want to read a second book. Okay, all right. If you like reading military history, World War II history, go for it. You got a whole list there. If you need somebody to send you one, I'll be happy to do so in the mail. Okay, all right. Secondly, you could watch more movies. Okay, I gave you the project option of the 3 movies from the Pacific Theater, but you may want to watch, okay, another movie on top of a project movie or something like that, on top of what you're doing normally for your projects. And your projects are due around May 1st, so keep that in mind. Okay, all right. And also too, I kind of surf through the channels at night on TV. I always come across World War II in color or another documentary about World War II. Watch one, okay? Give me a summary, okay? All right? These are all extra credit. The more you commit to the class, the more you do above and beyond, you always get credit for, okay? So you got a couple options there, okay? All right, let's get started. We're talking about today. Now, where we talked about last week was the idea of the reconquest of the Pacific, and I basically went through Nimitz's Central Pacific route. I left you in the summer of 1944 with the conquest of the Marianas, okay, all right? As far as the Southern Pacific route under MacArthur, that's what I want to address today, and I want to conclude with the October 1944 Battle of Leyte Gulf, one of the great naval battles. If you notice on the syllabus, I'm really caught up to where I want to be. This also has a couple other things. I want to talk about the CBI theater. I want to talk about code breaking. I want to talk about a couple other things there as well. So kind of a compendium of several different themes today. Let's start off with MacArthur and his Southern Pacific route. Okay, now again, it's always helpful if you have the map in front of you. The map I sent you, okay, in on the email, okay, if you could print that out, okay, you could trace it. That's a little frustrating for me. I'd love to be able to refer to a map, but I just can't make that work. All right. MacArthur's staging area was Australia. He was evacuated from the Philippines upon executive order, okay, and headed down to Australia. Australia in the Pacific theater is more or less like Britain was in the European theater. Okay, the jump-off point for the reconquest, particularly of the Southern Pacific, in this case. Australia was the key. It really was. Okay, the Japanese maybe made a mistake by never going after it. I'm not sure they would have taken it. Okay, but at any rate, they did bomb Port Darwin at the tip of the York Peninsula. Okay, northern edge of Australia. They sank or damaged about 11 or 12 ships in the harbor. All right, so yes, Australia was hit during the war. In the war, about 1 million Australians are going to serve, okay, all right? Many of them worked in the British, under the British Army, along with New Zealanders, all right? And they also worked as coast watchers. Now, last week I made the reference to Guadalcanal, okay, or 2 weeks ago, Guadalcanal. And in the Solomon Island chains, there were these guys given a radio, and they would set up on the edge of the jungles, okay, and just simply watch and report. They were called the Coast Watchers. And the Japanese never really caught many of them, okay? They were good. Many of them were Australian, all right? So they do play a role here. About 27,000 Australians are going to die in World War II in various theaters of the war. Well, where does MacArthur begin his reconquest? Well, keep in mind, okay, the Army took over operations in Guadalcanal, all right, in, I believe it was February of 1942. Three. All right, and he's going to work his way up the Solomon Island chain. Okay, so again, kind of in the northwesterly direction up toward New Britain and Rabaul. All right, that huge Japanese naval base at Rabaul is something they had to really contend with here. Okay, all right, he's going to work his way up through the island chain and kind of end the Solomon Islands campaign with the campaign on Bougainville. Bougainville was the largest of the islands, and there was about half a dozen airstrips on that island. All right, so the conquest of Bougainville toward the end of 1943 is going to kind of wrap things up. What's next? All right, he's going to now move to New Guinea. Okay, all right, but New Guinea is a very, very jungle terrain, okay, all right, mountainous, all right, very primitive, okay. You don't need to conquer the whole island, okay, all right. But if you land on the southern wing, southern flank of New Guinea, you got to cross the Owen Stanley Mountains. The Golden Staircase, they called it. That's not easy to do, okay. All right. There's a book out there called The Ghost Division, which is about, I think, the U.S. Army's, I don't want to be wrong, okay, but it's a U.S. Army division that literally climbed the Owen Stanley Range to attack the Japanese fortress at Buna, okay, on the northern shore, all right? So, having done that, MacArthur's going to work his way up the coast of New Guinea, okay, through most of 1943. Now, all right, he's going to kind of leapfrog up there. He's also going to take New Britain, and there's a very stiff fight on the a place called Cape Gloucester on New Britain. All right. So in other words, the fighting is pretty intense there. All the while Nimitz is doing his island hopping. Now, in 1944, by the spring of '44, okay, just before, the island hoppers are beginning to, Nimitz is beginning to take the Marianas. All right. We land on an island called Biak. Now, Biak, B-I-A-K. Not much is known about this battle, okay, in the general public, but I want to tell you, this to me is where the Japanese changed their strategy. Rather than trying to defeat the enemy on the beaches, okay, they hold up in caves and let the enemy come to them. This is going to result in deeper and greater bloodbaths on these Pacific Islands. They're going to use the same tactic on Iwo Jima. They're going to use the same tactic, as I suggested last week, on Peleliu. Peleliu's next, okay, all right? So this strategy really begins on Biak. Okay, Biak isn't the bloodiest battle of the war, but in some ways is some of the most frustrating. Okay, 2,500 Allied soldiers, mainly American Marines and Army mainly, are going to be killed and wounded. The Japanese are going to lose 4,700. So there are bloodier battles, but this one has a kind of an interesting point about the change in tactics. Then in September of '44, okay, Peleliu is hit. Now we talked about Peleliu last week. All right, whether it was necessary or not, and frankly, it probably wasn't necessary. No disrespect intended to the Marines that fought on that island, but at any rate, as I said to you last week, all right, that the National Museum of the Marine Corps called Peleliu the bitterest battle in the Pacific for the Marines. On a per capita basis, a ratio basis, it's the bloodiest battle in the Pacific. Okay, in terms of the number of men that went in and the number of men that didn't come out. Okay, all right, so at any rate, Peleliu is another one that doesn't get a lot of play, doesn't get a lot of publicity, okay, but it should. MacArthur wanted its airfields, okay, all right, there's 1, 2, 3, okay, on that and the surrounding island, all right, this would protect his right flank. He could also use those airfields for attacks on the Philippines. Remember, the Philippines was his home base of operations before the war, and the Philippines was something that he really wanted to conquer. I spoke last week about the debate about Formosa or the Philippines, bypassing the Philippines. I don't believe that's even feasible. You can't bypass an island chain with 3,000 islands, okay, manned by several Japanese divisions. I mean, it's and many airstrips, etc. Plus, we owed something to the Filipino people. There's no doubt about that. Well, I want to establish something else too. Part of the New Guinea campaign, and Biak was part of that campaign, it's the Western New Guinea campaign, all right, was also an attack on Morotai, not a bloody battle. Also an attack on Manaus, not a bloody battle, but these islands on the north coast have excellent anchorages, and these become, in effect, new Pearl Harbors, advanced bases. So if a ship is damaged or a ship needs resupply, it can go back to those bases rather than go all the way back to Pearl Harbor. We're going to establish another one called Ulithi, Okay, and I have to confess, my dad actually referred to Ulithi. He was stationed there for a while. All right, they built a massive base at Ulithi as well, which is in the western portion of the Marianas Islands. Okay, Southwest Marianas. So these are major advanced bases as we move closer to Japan, and in this case, for MacArthur, closer to the Philippines. Now, all right. What we need to take a look at next is not Peleliu. We've already done that, right? And also, too, I want to hold off on going over the material on Leyte Gulf till the end of the day here. Okay, let's talk about something, a forgotten theater now. I'm going to go over two forgotten theaters in particular. One is the CBI. Now, CBI stood for China, Burma, India. Was India attacked by Japanese forces? The average man on the street probably would say, I don't know, or they don't even know. No, they would say flat out no. You can answer yes. The Japanese did attack a major supply depot called Imphal. All right, Imphal in eastern India. Okay, was a major supply base connected by a road which led past the Kohima Ridge. So these battles are called the battles of Imphal and Kohima, and they're fought basically in March to July of 1944. All right, who's fighting here? Well, you've also got American forces under Vinegar Joe Stilwell. You've also got Chindit forces, the 3rd Indian Division. The Indian people are involved in this too, and they're called the Chindits, okay? Chindits. They fight very well, folks, they really do. In fact, I didn't tell you this story, but over in a European theater, you had Gurkha India fighters, okay? I think they were Sikh in religion, but I could be wrong on that, all right? But they were from India, okay? And these guys, like commandos, they would go out at night, particularly in the Italian theater, okay, all right, and they would take their long, curved Gurkha knives, okay, all right, and just slit throats in enemy foxholes and trenches, infiltrating and things like this. The Germans later on said they feared these guys more than anybody else, okay, because they operated individually and at night, things like that. So the Indian people did contribute to the war effort. Well, we also had bases in India. Remember at the beginning of the course, we talked about the attacks from the Flying Tigers and the bases, supply bases flying over the hump, the Himalayas, to get at the nationalist Chinese forces in their headquarters at Chongqing. All right, so India was involved. Okay, Imphal and Kohima again weren't the bloodiest battles of the war. Okay, but the Allies are going to lose about 12,000 plus. Okay, and about 55,000. Not all at Imphal or Kohima. They're also fighting in Burma. Okay, and they're building a railroad. POWs are building a railroad to connect portions of Burma with Imphal and Kohima, and they call it the Railroad of Death. You want to get an image of that? Here's a good extra credit movie. It's an old movie called Bridge Over the River Kwai. Okay, it was a classic bestseller when it came out. Like, watch this. It's a classic, and you'll see the treatment of Japanese treating Allied soldiers, mainly British in this case. All right, and the building of this bridge. Okay, and the Railway of Death. All right, so this is all going to be part of it. There were American forces there. A guy named Murrell's Marauders. Okay, all right, fought in this theater of the war, and there's actually a highway in New Jersey further up called Murrell's Marauders Highway. It's dedicated to them. I think it's in Jersey. I've seen it when I go up to New Hampshire. But anyway, all right. So Murrell's Marauders, okay, colorful name, colorful unit, okay. They will fight alongside the Chindits and alongside the British and alongside the New Zealanders and Australian folks fighting in the China, Burma, India theater. There is another footnote here too, that Joe Stilwell is one of the more colorful generals out of World War II. I like this guy, but he hated Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of nationalist China. He saw in him what this guy really was. The guy was corrupt, self-serving, okay, all right, and ambitious. And he saw an opportunity to take over China and things like this after the war, and they did not get along. So much of the material sent to Chiang's army ended up getting sold in the black market. I'm going to give you a quote now you're going to love. Harry Truman, this is after the war now, this is like 1948, 47, okay, when Congress was debating sending more aid to Chiang Kai-shek's army, because now they're fighting the Red Chinese in another phase of the Chinese Civil War. Truman didn't sign a bill allocating more funds and money for purchase of more military supplies. He says, why? Sending sending more aid to Chiang Kai-shek's army. That army couldn't fight its way out of a Chinese whorehouse, he said. That's Harry Truman, okay, all right? And so really there was issues with the Chinese government here. There were issues, okay? But at any rate, we needed China for its bases. We needed to keep them in the war because they pinned down so many Japanese troops. Remember, that Second Sino-Japanese War continued, began in 37, continued through 1945. Okay, so that's going to pin down a tremendous amount of Japanese soldiers during the course of the war. Second forgotten theater, okay, and that is the Aleutians. Now, there's a great book that came out. If you're looking for a second book to read, this is an awesome book. Came out about 1.5 years ago, called The Storm on Our Shores by Mark Opmasic. I mentioned this when I was going over the book list with you in the very beginning of class, beginning of the course. And in this book, okay, it describes the Aleutian campaign. I talked about it briefly. We talked about the Midway lecture, okay? Was this a diversionary strike north into the Aleutians off Alaska that would divert the American attention up there away from the Japanese attack on Midway? Well, that didn't happen, all right? But at any rate, the Japanese invaded with about 2,600 men, that's all, okay, in June of 1944. Well, in May of 1943, we come back and we land with the U.S. 7th Infantry Division, 11,000 men. When the fighting is done, okay, all right, it's not the bloodiest battle of the war, but it is fighting. It's on the island of Attu. Kiska was also hit, but the Japanese abandoned it. All right, there's really not much written about this. There's another book by Garfield called The 1,000-Mile War, okay, the 10,000-day war, maybe. No, it wouldn't be that. Okay, I apologize. 1,000-mile war, 1,000-day war. At any rate, but Garfield is the name of the author. All right, it's going to be a 3-week battle. Okay, and in the end, only 28 Japanese soldiers are going to survive this battle. Okay, so it's another story into itself. That's as far onto American soil as they got. Okay, the Japanese got. But 2 other things I want to talk about before we get to Leyte Gulf. Codes, all right? Persico wrote a book called Roosevelt's Secret War about the code-breaking efforts. Great book, okay, all right? And in the European theater, all right, we had basically the Ultra and the Enigma codes. Now, the Enigma code I talked about with the war at sea, that's the the German submarine codes. They were broken by the British, but they had to capture an Enigma machine. Now, the movie U-571 describes that, but it's historically flawed. It's historically bogus. It was made up. All right, the British secured the first Enigma machine, and they could find out where the Japanese. I'm still in the Japanese theater. They could find out where the German submarines are being sent to, and intercept them and reroute the convoys. All right, where were they breaking this code down? There's a place in Britain called Bletchley Park, and this became like the headquarters of the code breakers in World War II. I love this story. They actually, when they were recruiting people to work there, they looked for 2 kinds of people: math teachers and crossword puzzle experts. They ran a national contest who could solve crossword puzzles the quickest. People who can break down crossword puzzles and math teachers look at the world differently, folks. They really do. They'll look at a set of figures, and the numbers will reel back in my head. I won't even understand them. All right, but they can break things down. It takes an analytic mind like that, okay, that could help break down the codes. We broke those codes, so we knew we're reading the Germans' mail in that sense. Well, in the Pacific theater, we'd also broken the purple and the magic codes, okay, which was the Japanese diplomatic code, the Imperial Japanese Navy code. I was broken late in the war, all right? But here's another tidbit. They broke every one of our codes, the Japanese did. Every one. Now, this shocked me when I first read that. I only read that recently because I was finishing up a book about a man by the name of Nez, N-E-Z. I forget his first name now. He's the last of the code talkers. Now, who are the code talkers? He was a Navajo Indian, and we used the Navajo Indians for the code talking, all right, because they could literally converse verbally over the radio in an encoded Navajo dialect. They didn't speak pure Navajo, all right, but what they did is they had words translated. For example, they were saying that here comes 3 Japanese battleships. They would translate the word battleship into the Navajo word for wagon. Let's just say that, okay? So 3 wagons. They probably weren't even, they're more subtle than that, all right? And they could literally just talk over the radio. The Japanese never broke them, all right? They captured one Navajo, okay, tortured the guy, but frankly, they got the wrong guy. He didn't know the code, okay? They were trying to get the code out of him, all right? Chester Nez is his name. They were on Guadalcanal. They were on Bougainville. They were on Peleliu. They were in Iwo Jima. They were I don't know if they were in the Philippines or not, but I know they were also in the Okinawa. They were associated with the Marines. So the Navajo code talkers play a dramatic role in this war. All right, keep in mind that one. It was so much quicker listening to someone talk about something rather than have them encode the message, send the message in code, and then break down the code and react upon it. All right. I'll give you one tidbit on the fighting on Iwo Jima, which we'll talk about next week. Okay, all right, 800 messages, every single one of them went through without a glitch from the Navajo code talkers. Well, there were 32 of them initially, and later on there'll be 400 by the end of the war. We never even released the information about the code talkers till 1968. So none of them got dramatic medals during the war because it would really reveal who they were. All right, they were all given the Congressional Gold Medal, okay, in 1968, every one of them, all right, and Nez was the last of them. He died a couple years ago. They're all gone now, but his memoirs are out there. So the code talkers, the codes. Let's talk about one final element here, and this is going to play a dramatic role in next week's lecture: the U.S. submarines. Initially in the war, the torpedoes fired by American submarines and destroyers were simply garbage. How frustrating would this be? We have an enemy ship in your sights, your periscope sights, and you then send a torpedo span toward it, and doink, they don't explode. They hit and bounce off. They were duds. Okay, we had to improve this, and by late 1943, we did improve the technology in the torpedoes. One story is, and I have never seen this validated, is we actually secured a Japanese long lance torpedo. They were outstanding. Japanese torpedoes were the best, all right? And we broke it down and saw what they did that we didn't, and we got the technology from that. Possibly true, seems logical, okay? A spent torpedo, when it runs out of its fuel, just drops to the sea, and maybe we got a little lucky there. Japanese used their submarines differently than we did. We used ours like the Germans did, individually and in packs on patrols, okay? The Japanese never did that. They would send some out late in the war that way. The Indianapolis, I'll talk about that maybe next week, if not the following week, gets torpedoed by a lone wolf like that. But for the most part, they used them as part of the attack forces of the surface fleet. They would be alongside the attack forces, guarding the attack force, okay, with the battleships and the carriers and things like that, and then use them as part of the defense of that or an attack pattern in that. But they didn't send them out individually. Our submarines, arguably, will strangle Japan. I don't say arguably, they will strangle Japan in the end of the war. In the last 9 months of the war, American submarines sank almost 1,800 ships, including warships, almost 200 of them, mainly freighters and oilers. The oilers, okay, are coming in from Indonesia. The Japanese were so dependent upon that oil, and by the end of the war, they're starving for oil. One of the reasons for the kamikaze attacks is they could only send a plane out with enough aviation fuel for one trip. They couldn't make a return trip. All right. Now there's other dimensions to that, but that's part of it. Okay. All right. So at any rate, guys, what you're going to have here is the silent service, okay, the American submarines. We're going to lose 52 of them in the course of the war. That pales in significance compared to the Germans, right? But what they lost in the Atlantic. But this isn't often written about either. So I'm talking a lot about forgotten theaters today, right? That southern route through Bougainville and New Britain and New Guinea, okay, Biak, Peleliu, okay, all right, and also to the China-Burma India theater, right, the Aleutians, okay, the role of the code breakers in the submarines, all right, all of this stuff is part of the Pacific War, okay. God, I wish I could be teaching this to you live. I really do. There's so many things that I want to tell you beyond this. Okay, but you're getting the basic what you need here. Hopefully that chapter from my book, Call to Arms, is helpful in understanding this too as well. Puts it in perspective for you. Well, summer of '44, we're now taking off from bases in the Marianas, bombing the Japanese home islands. We haven't hit Tokyo yet, but that's coming. Okay, all right. We're also involved in September the fighting on Peleliu, which is going to be used, hopefully planned to be used for a jump-off point for the attack on the Philippines. That's coming in October. Well, that wasn't used for that purpose, but nonetheless, we're now up to October of 1944, and we're about to discuss the greatest naval battle of surface ships. Probably the last one ever to occur, too. Look at the Falkland Islands War. You'll see the Exocet missiles that were used to target ships hundreds of miles away, things like this. Right? Even in the Pacific War, the carrier battles were the dominant form of battle. No, surface ships don't see each other. Well, in this one, they did. All right? And this is October 1944, and I gave a talk on this at the college, and I opened it up with these words. And this will be, as history majors, you're going to love this, okay? Salamis, Lepanto, Trafalgar, Tsushima Straits, Jutland, Midway, the great naval battles in the history ranging back to the Greeks, all right? And right there in the midst of it is Leyte Gulf. Leyte is an island in the Philippines. Now, you have to picture, again, without a map, this is difficult, all right? But picture the Philippine archipelago, okay, the islands, all right? And pretty much in the south center is the island of Leyte. Had the best landing beaches. We're going to land here, and we're going to use this as a jump-off point for the conquest of the main island, the island of Luzon, where the capital is Manila. Well, all right, there are two straits, one from the north and one from the south, leading up to Leyte and Leyte Gulf. I showed you yesterday this way. Leyte Gulf, where the invasion force was. The invasion force had the transports, had a covering screen of destroyers, and an air patrol from different small carriers in the area. We're now using those escort carriers and those light carriers very dramatically. Okay, each one has about between 24 and 40 planes on it, and they can be very quickly produced and built. So the Japanese are going to come in basically three prongs. You could argue a fourth, but let me stay with it now. One's going to come through the northern strait, the San Bernardino Strait, San Bernardino. This is the main attack force. The second one is going to come through the Surigao Strait in the south. The third one is going to be a decoy coming in from the northeast under a Japanese admiral named Ozawa. This has got between 5 and 9 carriers, okay, but only about 75 planes total. All right, but this is a decoy intended to draw away the fire support team, the main batteries, the battleships, okay, and they're under Halsey. Halsey is going to bite on that decoy, and he's going to go flying northeast. This is going to lead Kincaid's force in Leyte Gulf, which is the transports, the carriers, right, undefended except for a small screen of destroyers. Now just think about this, all right? I'm going to come back to that. They're going to call it Bull's Run after Bull Halsey, okay? A guy, you know, if you wanted to do for extra credit, a second BB report, I'd love you to do that. Pick one of these battles we've talked about, or pick a dramatic figure like Bull Halsey, okay? Write about him, Jersey guy, okay, all right? So at any rate, and by the way, you can go on a battleship New Jersey. That's where I bought this shirt, by the way. You can go on a battleship New Jersey, sit in the bridge in the seat where he would have sat. Okay, that's so cool. All right, let's get some numbers here. Okay, the last great surface ship battle. Okay, possibly the largest naval battle in history. 200,000 men are involved, and over 282. Now another source says 367 ships. On a 100,000 square mile battle zone. Picture that. In the end, the United States is going to lose 3,000 men with 6 ships sunk and 200 planes shot down. The Japanese are going to lose 12,500, including 28 ships sunk and 300 planes sunk, shot down. They're going to lose the great battleship Musashi. I'll talk about that in due time here. Some say this is the last banzai charge of the Japanese surface fleet, the great combined fleet as they called it. Okay, I mentioned some names. I mentioned Halsey. Okay, there's another guy that hasn't surfaced yet. His name is Jesse Aldendorf. I like this guy. He is actually going to set up an ambush in which he has crossed the T. Remember, fleet sailing this way. If you cross the T on him, this fleet at the top has all the firepower. Okay, this one doesn't. And only its front guns from its front ships can fire. So you cross the T. That's the dream of every admiral. He's going to set that up. Now, Japanese attack plan I described. One coming in from the north, giant pincer movement. One coming in from the south, and another one coming in on a decoy expedition. Remember, we're reversing things in here. It's got to mirror me here. All right, all right. First contact is made by two submarines on October 23rd, the Darter and the Dace. Okay, we're going to lose one of those subs. It's going to run aground and we will destroy it. It can't get it off a reef. All right, but anyway, they will sink two heavy cruisers and heavily damage another one. Then they lose contact, and for 7 hours, Kurita's main fleet, that's the main battle fleet going through San Bernardino Strait in the north, okay, is going to be undetected. We don't know where it is, all right? But we do pick up Nishima's fleet coming in from the south, the southern pincer, all right? That's going to set up the first of 4 battles, okay, that the Battle of Leyte Gulf comprises, okay? One is the battle, I'm going to cover them each in order here, on October 24th, okay, all right, the Battle of the Subian Sea. This is the carrier attack versus Kurita's center force. This is the one coming in from San Bernardino Strait, okay, from the north. All right, we will meet them with the Task Force 38, the Intrepid, the Essex, and the Lexington, plus 2 more fleet carriers, all right. Here's the interesting thing, 5 p.m., okay, the light carrier Princeton was lost. Okay, all right, an armor-piercing bomb went down through the flight deck, exploded in the hangar deck. That's always a nightmare, okay? Explosions killed 108 men. At 7:30 p.m., though, we attacked the Musashi with a swarm of planes. The Musashi is bigger than the battleship New Jersey, the biggest battleship ever built. They had a bigger one planned in the dockyard I never got to see. There's also a sister ship called the Yamato. She's there, too. But we don't get the Yamato this time. We're going to get her in next week's lecture on Okinawa. All right, listen to this. When the Musashi was hit with 17 bomb hits and 19 torpedoes, she went down with virtually all hands. They said she went down bow first and stood like a skyscraper, almost like the Titanic. You've seen that movie, and then slipped straight down. All right, Musashi is gone. But Kurita backs off because he thinks now that he's been bloodied. Okay, all right. He knows where the American force is, but he's worried about Halsey. Where is Halsey? He doesn't know that Halsey's taken off after Ozawa's decoy force. He's thinking we're going to get finally destroyed if we stay here. All right. So he backs off. He didn't get to Kincaid's invasion force. Second battle's the next day. This is Nishimura, I mispronounced his name, I apologize. Nishimura's southern force comprised of 2 battleships, 1 cruiser, and 4 destroyers, right, to be reinforced by a ship, Shima's second striking force, going to link up before they go into Surigao Strait, all right, and it's going to have 3 more cruisers and 4 destroyers, okay? Aldendorf is sitting there waiting. I picture this now. You've got the island of Leyte, you've got the island of Luzon, might be Luzon, I'm not sure what island it is up there, I could be wrong on that. All right, but right here is the strait, okay? Now, the Japanese are going to come in through this angle. I'm reversing my hand position now, the way you would see it, okay? All right? On either side, along the coastline, are a screen of destroyers loaded with torpedoes. A first line of defense is the heavy cruisers. The second line of defense are the battleships. When the Japanese enter that force, they've entered a T. Remember I described crossing the T. Aldendorf has set a trap that's unbelievable. It'll be the last time battleships, okay, will face other battleships in battle, okay, all right? At the end of the day, okay, every single Japanese ship except one will go to the bottom. Shima steams in. He's sailing by about, oh gosh, I want to say about an hour or less steam time, okay, coming in. He sees the wreckage of Nishimura's fleet and just bails out. This is kind of unlike what you expect in the Japanese. You think the fight to the end and the suicide runs and everything else like that. But listen to some numbers about this. At 10:30 p.m. on the night of October 25th, much of this is a night battle too, okay? The torpedo boats make contact. They attack in 13 waves. They're alongside the destroyers. At 3 a.m., the destroyers now hit Nishimura's fleet, okay? Both battleships are hit. One is sunk, and three out of the 5 destroyers are immediately sunk too. One is the Fuso, and it's floating in 2 halves, okay? All right, they kind of get the crew off that. An hour later, the battleships open fire on Nishimura's fleet as well. 200 shells they will fire. The USS Mississippi is firing 14-inch guns. Okay, these are almost as big as the ones on the battleship New Jersey. These are powerful things. Okay, this is going to be the last battleship-to-battleship line battle ever fought in history. The cruiser Louisville is going to fire 333 shells from her guns alone. All right, the Yamashiro, a Japanese battleship, sinks. Okay, alongside Nishimura, goes down with its flagship and 1,400 men. This is at 4:19 a.m. The cruiser line, are you ready for this? That was the first line, battleships in the second line, fired 3,100 shells in 18 minutes. What a maelstrom of fire that Japanese fleet has sailed into. Nishimura lost 6 out of 7. Shima escapes, plays no further role. Well, later on, he's going to lose a couple of ships due to airplanes attacks. But the Japanese are going to lose 2 battleships, 1 cruiser, 3 destroyers. The United States lost 1 destroyer, 1 torpedo boat, and a grand total of 39 men. Now, this is the dramatic one. This is the big one. Okay, this is going to be the Battle of Samar. I prefer to call this the Battle of Surigao Strait, but I realize why historians don't call it that, because it also would be confusing with the first attack that Kurita launched in the Surigao Strait, the San Bernardino Strait, excuse me, the San Bernardino Strait northern of the pincer movement, okay? That could be called the Battle of San Bernardino Strait as well, okay? That's why they call that the Battle of Subian Sea. That's why they call this attack, the second attack into that same strait, the Battle of Samar. It's all part of the San Bernardino Strait. In other words, Kurita's coming back now, okay? All right. Versus Kinkaid's fleet. Now, keep in mind, the landscape has changed here because the aircraft carriers, Lexington and things like this, they're steaming northeast after Ozawa along with Halsey. All right, Halsey is called for Task Force 38. Join me in this attack. We're going to finish off the bulk of the Japanese combined fleet. That means the transports, those destroyers, and those light carriers are now exposed to the gunfire of Kurita's main attack force. Kurita enters San Bernardino Strait with 4 battleships, including the Yamato, all right, which is now the remaining largest battleship in the world. Okay, 8 cruisers, 11 destroyers, and he will achieve tactical surprise. He enters San Bernardino Strait at about 3 a.m. Kinkaid has his 7th fleet, has 3 escort carriers. Now, escort carriers, as you know, had about 40 planes, okay, each. All right, and they were surrounded by destroyers. They called them Taffy 1, Taffy 2, and Taffy 3. 16 escort carriers in total, so 3 sets of 4 or 5, okay? Now, along with the destroyers. Each had 28 planes, that's all, so they were light carriers as well, all right? And protected by 21 destroyers and destroyer escorts. 6:45 a.m., Kurita orders general attack. This is a mistake, folks, okay, all right? By the way, I'm going to give you a little hint about something here. I've already written up your final exam. You're going to get 1 essay. I'll talk more about this down the road. But the essay is going to be basically key mistakes made throughout World War II. You can include this one in it, all right? When Kurita orders general attack, it's no plan, okay? He just sends them out. Go play, boys, okay, all right? There's no attack plan. He loses the vital elements of command and control that any admiral or general has to have in any kind of battle, all right? So they go in charging like the cavalry coming over the ridge, okay, all right? The first 4 destroyers from Taffy 3 go in. The Heermann, the Johnston, the Hale, and the Roberts in a massive torpedo attack. And guys, these destroyers, okay, read Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors by Hornfisher. All right, I actually started to tear up at one point in this. All right, reading the dramatic heroism of this. These destroyers go steaming right into the columns of the Japanese fleet, launching torpedoes left and right. sinking ships, hitting ships, all right? And a Japanese sailor has more fear of a torpedo than anything else. Any sailor does, all right? They withdraw because they're out of ammo. The Johnston, okay, all right, pulls back. She's heavily damaged and has no torpedoes left. The Hale, the Roberts, and the Heermann have been sunk, all right? The next wave of American destroyers go in. The Hale, with no ammo except her 5-inch guns, seized them and said, boys, we're going back in. They turn around, damaged they were, and steam back in with the rest of the suicide run, basically, by those destroyers. Those destroyers will hold off Kurita's fleet, and they will save the aircraft carriers. Not totally. Listen to this now. The escort carriers at 7:45 a.m. launched a massive attack. Every plane they have. All right. That's when the second wave of destroyers went in too. One escort carrier, the Gambier Bay, was sunk by shell fire from the Yamato. The San Lo sinks by a kamikaze. Now, the kamikazes weren't orchestrating attacks yet, but individual pilots would. If they know they're mortally wounded, they know their plane's going down, they'll crash it into a ship. All right. So we'll talk more about them next week. The San Lo is sunk. All right. The Kalinin Bay takes 14 hits. The Fanshawe Bay takes another hit from plus 2 kamikaze strikes. 3 more destroyers, the Kitkun Bay, the Santee, the Sawney, and even the destroyer Ebersol are sunk the next day, okay, all right? Kurita suddenly withdraws. He can't take any more hits from those destroyers. Kinkaid's destroyers have saved the day, but it's not over yet, okay? Kinkaid sent out a message to Halsey saying, I want to give you the exact wording here, 7:39 a.m., he said, help needed from heavy ships immediately. Situation critical. He needs the 3rd Fleet under Halsey to turn around and come back. Halsey later on saw this as a mistake. He says, I've got to finish off this fleet that Ozawa has. That's the main Japanese attack fleet, or so he thought. This is where I say his reputation gets damaged. Back in Pearl Harbor, Nimitz is monitoring all this in the radio traffic. And he sends a message saying this. He's the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Theater now. This is SINCPAC, they call it, okay? The full message read this. Turkey trots to water. GG. Where is, repeat, where is Task Force 34? RR, the world wonders. Now, beyond the message, where is Task Force 34? That's what they call lettuce. It's just a string of words. Remember, these are all sent in one message here, okay? One long sentence. There's no break between words, okay? So it was meant to, in a very simplified method, to encode it. What the messengers that Halsey gets, and he doesn't get the message till about 10 a.m. This is 2.5 hours after the initial message had been sent, all right? He gets the message from Kinkaid, and then he gets this follow-up one that says, where is Task Force 38? The world wonders. This is seen as an insult. Where are you? Is basically what Nimitz is saying to Halsey. Halsey, they say, broke down on the bridge and cried like a baby. He was so distraught at the fact that he's been bluffed here, or whatever it might be. Okay, all right? Later on, we reveal that all the message only said, where is Task Force 38? He was trying to pin him down where he was and then direct him into battle if he could make it in time. All right? He didn't intend to add in there the world wonders. That came from an Alfred Lord Tennyson poem. Somebody might have spotted it here. Okay, Charge of the Light Brigade, fought in 1856. Yes, 54. Okay, all right. On the same day that the Battle of Leyte Gulf was being fought. So they just threw that in there as lettuce. All right, and but this, to the end of his days, Halsey had trouble living that down. Okay, that he was insulted. All right. Admiral King, the CNO, the Chief of Naval Operations, and also Halsey himself, Nimitz himself, never criticized Halsey for what he did, okay, all right? Halsey later on felt his own mistake was going back to help Kinkaid, because by the time he got there, the battle's over, all right, when he could have finished off Ozawa's fleet. Now, they did send a task force up to finish off Ozawa's fleet, and they got the most of them. That was it. So, the final battle is that attack on what they call Cape Magano, which is basically Halsey's attack on Ozawa's fleet. Okay, what's interesting is he will sink virtually all those carriers, and that means that every carrier the Japanese had used in the attack on Pearl Harbor has gone to the bottom. Think about the contrast. I spoke about it earlier. Every one of the battleships that they hit, except for 3, have re-entered the war. So tactical victory at the moment, but strategic defeat overall. All right. Halsey's going to break off at 11:15 to support Leyte Gulf attack. Halsey will detach two battleships, 3 cruisers, and 8 destroyers after the remnants of the fleet. Okay, and between 5 p.m. and 11:10 p.m., all right, they will sink 2 cruisers and 3 destroyers. They don't finish them off, but for all intents and purposes, Ozawa's fleet's done. Okay, now, what have we learned from Leyte Gulf? Okay, well, one of the great naval battles in history, you've seen that. Actually, 4 battles in one. Okay, all right. The landings on Leyte have been protected. All right, the fighting on Leyte is tougher than anybody believes. Okay, but we do take Leyte Island, and by January of 1945, we've landed on Luzon. We'll be driving northward on the island of Luzon. All right, the kamikazes have begun to appear. Now, I want to do a little bit more with this before I break for today. Okay. First of all, we landed on Luzon. It's going to be an 11-month campaign, and it's going to tie down 500,000 Japanese troops. You couldn't bypass the Philippines, okay, all right? Maybe I'm ignorant on this and lack of understanding, but I just don't see it, okay, all right? And it did tie down. This was not a wasted campaign, the Philippines. And, of course, MacArthur, when he landed, that's a great story. I got to share this. Look, Google the picture of MacArthur landing, okay, all right, in the Philippines, off Leyte, actually, okay, all right, and maybe it was Luzon, I forget where we actually came ashore. He wanted the landing craft to move right up on the sand so he wouldn't get his feet wet. When he goes off the landing craft and he has to wade through the water, about ankle deep, calf high deep, maybe, that's all, shin deep, okay, all right. One of his staff officers, general, this is one of the most dramatic pictures of the war, okay, all right. Don't bother to wait for the transport to dump you on the beach. Wade through the surf like the soldiers did. You see, you're right on. So you see this picture of him wading dramatically through the surf. Okay, this is a 4-star general, all right, going ashore. And he says, I have returned. Remember the I shall return quote. All right. Now, the Japanese are going to draw up the island. Okay, all right. And one of the horrors of the war, General Yamashita, is going to destroy the city of Manila. 3/4 of it burned out, 100,000 civilians killed, and an atrocity that rivals that of Nanking. Okay, all right. The Pearl of the Orient, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, Manila, is going down into rubble. All right. He will later be executed for war crimes. For not only this, but for the way he treated POWs. The POW camps are on Luzon. Watch the movie The Great Raid. The freeing of the Cabatadoan camp by an Army Ranger outfit. All right, the orders had come out. I don't know if it came from Yamashita. I'm sorry, but or if it came from Japanese High Command. It was the High Command, but it said kill all, to kill all the POWs. They would stage air raids. Air raid signal goes off. All the POWs got to get in the air raid shelters. They'd pump in gasoline and throw in a match, a flamethrower, okay, and just kill these guys, okay? So we're getting atrocity. They got to rescue these poor POWs, okay, out of the camps. All right, basically 4 out of 10 American, Australian, New Zealand, and British POWs will die in Japanese camps, okay, all right? It's an atrocity in and of itself. Now, all right, from the Philippines, the airfields, the heavy bombers, okay, all right, are able to take off and literally light up Japan. So not only are they getting hit from bases in Marianas, but also bases in the Philippines. On the night of January 9th and 10th, I'm sorry, March 9th and 10th, Tokyo was hit by 3,000 planes, burned out 16 square miles of the city, and killed between 83,000 and 150,000, incinerated them. Tokyo, okay? All right, the first attack on Tokyo had been back in February, okay? The fast carriers, they called them, the big Essex class carrier groups, had done an airstrike on Tokyo Bay. But also, too, the first formal kamikaze waves had started in in November of 44 off the Philippines. Now, this is going to influence a decision that Halsey's going to make. He receives a memo in December of 1944. He's got his task force, his Third Fleet out at sea. The task force receives a memo from weather stations on Guam. Massive typhoon coming your way. Typhoons are Pacific hurricanes. Cyclones are hurricanes in the Indian Ocean. All the same thing. Pearl Harbor sends back a memo saying, this is not our radar screen. We don't believe you. That's what the Pearl Harbor weather station said. So Halsey doesn't believe it either. All right. Plus, he doesn't want to put his ships into anchorage where they could be sitting ducks for kamikazes now. All right. And the kamikazes had started the month earlier. So he keeps that fleet out at sea. They need refueling. The oiler ships are coming, but it means that a ship without oil, they would use the oil as ballast, okay, to keep the ship stable in the water. If you don't have the oil in there, okay, all right, that ship rides high in the water, it's subject to tipping now, all right? This typhoon hits. Read about it in your chapter that I wrote in that book called To Arms, okay? My dad went through that. He was a radio man on an attack transport. Okay, he was later involved in the Okinawa campaign. Read Halsey's Typhoon by Drury and Clavin. They speak of waves 90 feet. That's virtually a tidal wave out at sea. Carriers going down into the waves and coming back up. You don't even see the carrier or the battleships, okay, in between the waves, the massive waves. 3 destroyers will roll over in the trough, okay, between the waves. You don't get caught in the trough. You sail into the trough. You guys know that, okay? All right? And you don't want to get caught in the trough where you're rocking back and forth. 3 destroyers overturn and go down with almost all hands, okay? We're going to lose 700 sailors in Halsey's Typhoon. And they blame Halsey for this. I can understand his logic, but Halsey was a controversial admiral. But he also was a gutsy admiral, too. So I'm a Halsey fan. I really am. That 700 casualty figure is worse than the attack at Midway, folks. All right, it's a bloodier set of natural causes than Midway was militarily. So where are we now? We're now into early 1945. We're closing in on Japan. The fighting is still raging in China, but we're not involved in it. The fighting is still raging in the Philippines. We're involved in that. All right. But we're coming up on now an island in the Bonin Islands, the volcano islands, shaped like a pork chop. 3 airfields, 2 are up, 1 under construction, okay? And it's midway between the Marianas and Japanese home islands. The big P-29s going from the Marianas have to pass over this island. And up from the island will swarm fighter planes, okay? But also, too, there are radio stations there. We talked about this briefly before. This island is Iwo Jima, and it's going to be invaded on February 19th, 1945. We'll be taking a look at that, the campaign in Okinawa, and the decision of whether to invade the home islands of Japan or drop the bomb, okay, is coming up next week. I'll see you then.